So, hey, thank you for watching this, and thank you for subscribing and following me on YouTube. I wanted to do some additional videos and things to give you all some background. Some of you may have heard this story and some of the other stories I'm going to tell, but I really want to let you know kind of how I got to where I am, where my wife and I are going out and photographing these horses. It goes to pre-COVID time. Actually, it goes 10 years ago. I've for a long time, I've been like a part-time photographer. I only did portraits, only wanted to do portraits, didn't want to shoot anything other than people because it was just something I did maybe in the evenings and on the weekends. Um, I had a job just before COVID where I traveled extensively. I flew out every Monday and came home every Thursday night or Friday, and it left me very little time to do the photography. Wanting to do photography full time, yet having benefits, retirement, and a great job that I really, really did love. I don't think it was ever something I would have just quit. I don't think I could have. But when COVID happened and we all went into the lockdown, I was obviously furloughed. There was no traveling happening anywhere, and I was just put on furlough. And that's where my wife and I decided, hey, let's not hang around the house so much and let's go do something. I was used to being out and traveling. So we loaded up our SUV and we took off for Yellowstone and just see if we maybe get some pictures of some mountains and bears and buffalo, things like that. And we had a great trip. We're driving out there. It was great because no one was on the road. It was like a ghost town. And we pulled into Cody, Wyoming. And as we were checking into the Holiday Inn there in Cody, using our points from all of my travel, my wife had been on her phone and said, there's wild horses out here. And I was like, I didn't even know there were wild horses. I had no idea. And she started looking some more. We checked into our hotel. It was early afternoon. And we decided, let's go out and try to find some wild horses. So we went to an area called McCulloch Peaks. And we spent, I don't know, it must have been 3-4 hours just driving around this area looking for wild horses. We didn't have a clue what we were doing. We loved it, but we did not find a single horse. So we went back and we spent the night in the hotel. And we thought, look, this is something would really be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And so we looked again online and found that there was a place in Cody that did tours of the wild horses. They would take you out and show you the wild horses. And it was reasonable, so we went and we called. We made a reservation for that morning. And it was just the two of us on this big tour van, and the guide took us out, and it probably took him, I would say at least an hour, hour and a half before we found our first horse. The interesting thing we learned is that even though McCulloch Peaks has a horse management area, McCulloch Peaks is a much larger area than just the horse management area. The place that we spent hours looking for horses, there were no horses in that area. It was more of an off-road camping kind of an area controlled by the Bureau of Land Management. And so we were with this guide, and he took us out, and we saw our first horses. It was absolutely amazing. And it was great that it was just the three of us on this tour because he began to tell us things about the horses. In particular, the stallions. As the stallions get older, they have to fight in order to stay in the herd. And as they get older, they eventually get kicked out of the herd. We stumbled across 3 stallions. One goes by the name of Washakie. He's named after the Indian chief. And that's a whole nother story, whole nother set of pictures and video. But there was this one horse that very, very dark colored. And I was sitting there with my camera on my tripod, and he just kept walking towards me. And I'm looking at this horse, and his ears looked like they had been bitten off. The tips had been bitten. He was scratched. He was just battle-torn. And he was just looking right at me, coming towards me. Now, I'm sitting here looking through this huge lens in my camera. For the first time, it's this wild horse, and he keeps coming to me. And look, I'm not weird. Well, some would say I'm weird. But my wife is shaking her head back there. But I'm looking at this horse, and I'm identifying with this horse. This horse had gotten older. He'd been kicked out of the herd. He's living on his own. He's beat up and scarred. He really didn't know, other than just eating grass and sagebrush and finding a water hole from time to time, he was trying to survive. And I'm thinking, I'm older, I've been beat up, I don't have the security of a job, I don't know what's going to happen when I get back home. Thank God I've not been kicked out of the herd yet, like he had been, but that's always a possibility. So I'm really identifying with this horse. It was really a special, special time because it was a bond. And again, horse people know this. People that love horses and have horses, they know how special they can be. This was my first experience, and it was really, really something. So it was really a kind of a life-altering time. We stayed, we took more pictures. We went back into Cody, we thanked the guide, and then got in our car and ran right back out again to the horse management area and started finding more horses. Another great thing about going out with a guide is we had the time. He took us out and showed us things about the desert, the high desert there, that we had really didn't know and hadn't seen before. For instance, he cut open a cactus for us, the prickly pear, I guess, and he cut that open and we all took a bite of that. Something you wouldn't normally do. It was just really a special thing. If you get into Cody, it's well worth your money to take that tour. It's a couple hours. You'll learn where to go, kind of how to go, and then dump off the guide. Listen, this is public land. This is government-owned land. You just have to open a gate, drive through, and shut the gate when you leave. That's it. The only rule really within common sense is just shut the gates after you leave so that the horses don't get out. So that was kind of a neat thing. We fell in love with it so much. The next year we actually stayed. We didn't stay in the hotel. We stayed on the high desert land in a tent. Many, many stories, crazy things that happened with that. This last year, the last couple times we've gone, we have actually slept in the back of our SUV. We don't want to leave town and drive 30, 40 minutes to an hour to a hotel. We want to stay right out there from sun up to sundown. But I want to tell you something very special about this picture that only a handful of people know. I wasn't a wildlife photographer. I'm not a landscape photographer, although I do landscape and I do wildlife. But at that time, I was strictly a people portrait photographer. And I had this picture of the warrior, came back home, and I've got a friend at church. He's just someone I've known for, 25 years or so. His name is Billy. And I showed him the picture. And I knew it was a good picture, but Billy just said, "Oh my God, I need this. I want this picture." One thing about the picture that you'll probably never see is that picture was taken at the midday. Sun was out. The color was terrible. But when you're photographing something wild, you have to photograph it while you can. And so when I came home and went through and was doing my editing, the sky behind the warrior was a very pale, ugly, white, gray mass. There was no texture, there were no clouds, it was nothing. So you had this beautiful horse coming towards me with all of the detail, but the ugliest sky in the background. And Billy had seen that picture and said, "I want that picture, I love that horse." So I went home from church that day and I started playing around with it. And listen, I know some of you are photography purists, and that's great, I support you in that, but it's an incredibly common thing with a lot of photographers who are also artists to use sky replacement. Believe it or not, if you don't know this, I don't mean to shatter your world, but there are places where you can purchase skies and replace sky. And that's what I started to do. I thought, this picture needs something. And so I replaced the sky from a stock sky and thought it just looked amazing. So I told Billy, I said, "Billy, do you want this one or this one? The white plane or the beautiful sky?" He said, "I want the sky one. Give me that one." Well, Billy started sending it around, putting on social media, showing his friends, and people went crazy over it and started asking for that particular picture, and it took off from there. So you probably wouldn't know that it was a sky from another picture or from another time. Only really photographers who maybe seen this sky before would know it. I'm not an editorial photographer. I do not photograph necessarily the truth and the whole truth. I love to create art, and I do that within Photoshop and on my computer. In all honesty, I've probably only replaced skies in about 3 of my pictures total. But I do reserve the right to do it in the future, because sometimes you just have an ugly sky when you're out shooting. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you. That is something that not everybody knows. Most people just love the picture for what it is, but it's just a neat little thing. And I also wanted to give homage to Billy, because he has been such a supporter and a fan, and has really encouraged me in following in this new genre of photography that I had never done before. I was telling the story to Billy about the picture, about how this horse was just walking towards me. And by the way, I've got about 60 frames of that. I would rattle off a few shots, back up. I had to keep backing up because he kept coming closer and closer. And you want to keep a respectful distance. But he just kept coming at me. And out of about 60 pictures that I took, this particular picture was just perfect. The way he had his head down, he was looking at me in mid-step. And he was just all beat up. I mean, those horses out there just really fight like crazy. And I know that Billy had looked at it. He said, you know what, you should call that the Warrior. And I thought, you know, that's really true. I do need to call it the Warrior. And that's what it's called. It's called the Warrior, in honor of the horse and the battle he had been through, but also me kind of identifying with him. When I got back home, the Warrior took off like crazy, and I lost my job. I was laid off. And I'll never forget sitting in my bedroom when my boss was calling me to tell me that I did not have a job to come home to. I was scared to death that he was going to say, well, we want you back. You need to get back to work. Because I knew that this was an opportunity for me to pursue my photography full time. So that's where the name The Warrior came from. Another thing with that name is such an impactful thing. We've had people order that on a blanket as a gift for cancer patients and people going through difficult times, because the resiliency and the humbleness, yet the resiliency and effort to keep moving is portrayed in the picture so much. So anyway, thanks for letting me share that with you.